Welcome back to True Stories, where we share remarkable moments that remind us of the importance of standing up against bullying. Comment where you're watching from today, as we dive into an extraordinary encounter that unfolded outside a prestigious tech conference in Austin, Texas. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the convention center plaza, where a group of climate activists had gathered to protest the environmental impact of space exploration. Among them stood Beckett Monroe, a passionate environmental activist known for his aggressive confrontational style and theatrical protests. Elon Musk, Elon's teenage son, had just finished giving his first public presentation on sustainable energy innovations at the youth section of the conference. Despite his young age, he carried himself with remarkable composure, though his slightly nervous adjustments to his conference badge betrayed his youth. The scene might have remained peaceful if not for the presence of Jason Statham, who was attending the conference to research a role in an upcoming tech thriller. The action star stood quietly near the entrance, observing the growing tension with the tactical awareness he'd developed through years of both film and martial arts training. Heath Montgomery, a local news reporter, had positioned himself strategically between the protesters and the conference exit, sensing that the confluence of personalities might produce something newsworthy. He wasn't wrong. As X-12 emerged from the building, Beckett saw his opportunity. The activist had prepared for this moment, armed with a megaphone and a series of carefully crafted insults designed to provoke a response from the teenager. Keaton Wells, the head of conference security, monitored the situation with growing concern. The protest permit allowed for peaceful demonstration, but Beckett's body language suggested he had more confrontational plans in mind. The first volley came as X-12 stepped into the plaza. "Look who it is." Beckett's voice boomed through the megaphone. "Daddy's little science experiment. Did he program you to destroy the environment too?" Marcus Ellery, a tech journalist covering the conference, noticed Jason Statham shift his position slightly, moving with the casual grace of someone accustomed to reading potentially dangerous situations. Noah Sinclair, another protester who believed in more peaceful methods, tried to calm Beckett down. "This isn't the way," he whispered, but Beckett was already committed to his performance. The teenager maintained his composure, attempting to walk past the protesters with dignity. His presentation on sustainable energy innovations had actually addressed many of their concerns, but Beckett wasn't interested in facts or dialogue. Orion West, a student volunteer who had helped with X-12's presentation, stepped forward to escort him to the waiting car. But Beckett had other plans, moving to block their path while his supporters formed a loose circle around them. Jason Statham's presence had gone unnoticed by the protesters, but those who recognized him saw him smoothly positioning himself for a better view of the situation. His movements were casual but purposeful, like a chess player quietly positioning pieces for an eventual checkmate. The situation escalated as Beckett launched into a prepared speech, his voice dripping with mockery. "What's it like being a walking PR stunt? Do you even have real feelings? Or did Daddy program those too?" Quinton Shaw, another conference attendee, had started recording the incident on his phone. The footage would later prove crucial in understanding how a simple protest transformed into a defining moment about bullying and responsibility. X-12's composure began to crack slightly, not from anger but from the natural hurt of a young person facing public humiliation. It was this moment of vulnerability that caught Jason Statham's attention. Seth Brantley, a local business owner watching from the sidelines, would later describe the shift in Statham's demeanor as like watching a switch flip from casual observer to protective force. The protesters, emboldened by their apparent success in rattling the teenager, pressed closer. Tate Winslow, a more aggressive member of the group, began waving a sign depicting X-12 as a robot puppet, adding a personal cruelty to what had started as an environmental protest. Upton Reese, the conference organizer, had emerged from the building and was rapidly assessing the situation. He caught sight of Jason Statham's subtle movements and recognized that something significant was about to unfold. What happened next would transform a moment of cruelty into a powerful lesson about standing up to bullies. As Beckett reached the crescendo of his performance, Jason Statham prepared to demonstrate that real strength lies not in attacking the vulnerable, but in protecting them. The absence of any response from Donald Trump, who was scheduled to speak at the conference later that day, would later become a subject of much discussion. But in that moment, all attention was focused on the growing confrontation in the plaza. The autumn breeze carried the sound of Beckett's mockery across the plaza, but it also carried something else: the quiet footsteps of someone who had spent a career playing heroes and was about to become one in real life. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up against bullying in an unexpected way? Share your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful moments of courage come from the most unlikely defenders. The tension in the plaza continued to build as Abigail Monroe, a tech reporter from a major news network, pushed through the crowd to get a better view. She had come to cover the conference but found herself witnessing something far more compelling than another tech presentation. Elodie Hart, one of the conference's keynote speakers, watched from the safety of the lobby as the situation outside grew more volatile. Through the glass doors, she could see Jason Statham's subtle movements, recognizing the controlled precision that came from years of martial arts training. Beckett's attacks grew more personal, his words calculated to cut deeper than any environmental critique. "Hey, robot boy," he shouted through the megaphone. "Did Daddy have to update your firmware to feel emotions? What's your processing power for handling rejection?" Freya Lowell, a child psychologist who had been attending the youth section of the conference, recognized the signs of genuine distress in XAA-12's body language. Despite his composed exterior, the teenager was clearly struggling with the public humiliation. The crowd had grown larger, with Georgia Wynn, a social media influencer, live-streaming the confrontation to her millions of followers. Her commentary captured the growing discomfort among the onlookers as the protest crossed the line from political statement to personal attack. Harper Ellis, one of the security team members, touched her earpiece as she received updates about the situation. The protest permit didn't cover harassment, but intervening too quickly could escalate things further. She caught Jason Statham's eye, and a silent understanding passed between them. Isla Montgomery, another conference attendee, had stepped closer to XA-12, attempting to provide some moral support. The teenager's presentation on sustainable energy had impressed her, making the current attack seem even more unjust. The protesters had formed a tight circle now, with Josie Vance, one of Beckett's more aggressive supporters, leading a mocking chant about privileged tech families. The personal nature of the attacks had transformed what should have been a legitimate environmental protest into something uglier. Kaya Whitmore, the conference's head of public relations, was rapidly typing on her phone, trying to manage the growing social media storm. The hashtag #techbullying was trending, with opinions sharply divided between those condemning and supporting the protesters' actions. Lillian Hale, an environmental scientist who had reviewed XA-12's presentation proposals, found herself torn between supporting climate activism and opposing the cruel personal attacks on a teenager. She moved closer to the group, hoping to redirect the conversation toward actual environmental issues. Maisie James, one of the more reasonable protesters, had stepped back from the group, clearly uncomfortable with how personal the attacks had become. Her sign about corporate responsibility hung limply at her side as she watched her cause being hijacked by bullies. The situation reached a new level when Nora Lennox, another of Beckett's supporters, pulled out a crude robot puppet with XA-12's name tagged on it. The theatrical mockery drew laughs from some protesters but disgusted looks from most onlookers. Odessa Blake, a veteran journalist, had begun documenting the scene with professional detachment, though her expression betrayed her concern about the increasingly hostile atmosphere. Her camera caught Jason Statham's subtle positioning, like a chess master quietly arranging his pieces. Penelope Shaw, the conference's youth program coordinator, tried to intervene, reminding the protesters that they were attacking a minor. Her words were drowned out by Beckett's megaphone as he launched into another round of personal insults. Quinn Avery, a security consultant hired for the conference, had noted how Jason Statham's apparently casual movements had actually created a clear path to extract the teenager if needed. It was the kind of tactical awareness that came from years of both real and choreographed combat. Romalie Hayes, who had helped organize the youth presentation section, felt a deep sense of responsibility for the situation. She had encouraged XA-12 to share his innovations, never expecting it would make him a target for such focused hostility. The The protesters' circle tightened, with Serena Banks, another of Beckett's followers, waving a sign that twisted the teenager's unique name into a cruel joke. The personal attacks had moved far beyond legitimate environmental concerns. Tamsin Clark, a local activist known for more constructive approaches to environmental advocacy, watched in dismay as the protest devolved into bullying. She had tried to warn Beckett about the dangers of personal attacks, but he had been too focused on creating a viral moment. Ursula Merrick, the conference's legal counsel, was already on the phone with city officials about the protest permit violations. But legal solutions would take too long to address the immediate situation unfolding in the plaza. Valerie Holt, a child welfare advocate who had been attending the conference, pushed through the crowd toward XA12. Her professional instincts told her the teenager needed support, even as Jason Statham prepared for a more direct intervention. Winnie Drake, another conference organizer, had positioned herself near the building's secondary exit, ready to provide an escape route if needed. She caught Jason Statham's slight nod, understanding that he was aware of the alternate exit. The tension reached a new peak as Beckett produced a tablet displaying a mocking animation of XA12 being controlled by puppet strings. The crude personal attack marked a clear transition from protest to harassment. Zandra Lowe, a tech ethics professor who had been impressed by XA12's presentation on sustainable innovation, stepped forward to object to the bullying. Her voice was quickly drowned out by the protesters' chants, but her movement caught Jason Statham's attention. Yvette Moore, a student journalist covering the conference, had started a live stream that captured both the protesters' increasing aggression and Jason Statham's subtle preparation for intervention. Her commentary noted the stark contrast between the actors' calm professionalism and the protesters' theatrical cruelty. The afternoon sun cast harsh shadows across the plaza as the situation approached its breaking point. Zoe Vaughn, another conference attendant, noticed how the protesters had inadvertently positioned themselves perfectly for what was about to unfold. Jason Statham's presence had remained remarkably understated, but those with combat training could read his positioning like a book. He had created clear lanes of movement while maintaining multiple options for intervention, all while appearing to be merely an interested observer. Donald Trump's continued absence from the situation, despite being in the building, added another layer of tension to the scene. His silence on the matter would later become a subject of intense discussion on social media and news outlets. The plaza had become an impromptu arena, with the afternoon sun casting long shadows that seemed to underscore the dramatic nature of the unfolding scene. The participants remained unaware that they were about to become part of a viral moment that would challenge society's views on bullying and responsibility. Have you ever witnessed someone prepare to stand up against bullying in a calculated, professional way? Share your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most effective interventions come from those who understand that true strength lies in controlled response rather than reactive anger. The moment of intervention began with a simple step forward. Jason Statham, who had been positioning himself with the precision of a chess master, finally made his move. Easton Hale, a combat sports journalist covering the tech conference's security measures, would later describe it as the most controlled display of power I've ever witnessed. The action star's movement drew immediate attention from Jonas Crow, one of the more observant security guards, who recognized the practiced economy of motion that distinguished a trained fighter from a casual bystander. Without any obvious aggression, Statham had somehow commanded the entire plaza's attention. "That's enough," Statham's gravelly voice cut through the chaos with quiet authority. The British accent, familiar to millions from his films, carried the weight of someone used to being heard. Zeke Hamilton, a body language expert present at the conference, noted how the actor's stance projected both capability and restraint. Beckett, still holding his megaphone, turned to face this new intervention. "Well, look who it is. Hollywood's tough guy wants to play hero." His words carried less conviction now, the bravado slightly hollow as he faced someone known for both on-screen and real-life martial arts expertise. Finnegan Hart, a child psychologist who had been watching the situation unfold, observed how Statham's presence had immediately changed the power dynamics. The actor hadn't made any aggressive moves, but his controlled confidence had an immediate impact on the crowd. "You know what real strength is?" Statham asked, his voice carrying across the plaza without needing amplification. "It's not about attacking kids. It's about standing up for what's right without becoming what you claim to hate." Garrett Lowe, another conference attendant with military background, noticed how Statham had created clear exit routes while simultaneously containing potential threats. It was the kind of tactical awareness that came from years of both choreographed and real combat training. The protesters' circle began to break apart as Holden Briggs, one of the more thoughtful demonstrators, stepped back from the group. "He's right," Holden announced, lowering his sign. "This isn't about the environment anymore. This is just bullying." Jasper Trent, who had been live-streaming the confrontation, captured the moment when several other protesters followed Holden's lead. The unified front of the protest began to crack as more participants recognized how far they had strayed from their original purpose. Kendrick Shaw, an environmental ethics professor attending the conference, spoke up in support of Statham's intervention. "We can oppose corporate policies without attacking children. This kind of behavior undermines legitimate environmental concerns." Levi Brooks, another security team member, had positioned himself to support whatever action Statham might take. But the actor's approach made physical intervention unnecessary. His presence and words were doing what force could not, changing minds. Maddox Price, one of the conference organizers, watched in amazement as Statham navigated the situation with unexpected diplomacy. "Your environmental concerns are valid," the actor continued, "but your methods are doing more harm than good." The tension in the plaza shifted as Nolan Carrick, a senior environmental activist, stepped forward to address his fellow protesters. "This isn't us," he declared. "We're here to fight for the planet, not to bully teenagers." Owen Thatcher, a media psychology researcher, observed how Statham's intervention had transformed the narrative. What had been a story about protesters attacking a privileged teenager was becoming a lesson about standing up to bullying with dignity. Parker Vance, who had been documenting the protest for an environmental journal, put down his camera. "We've lost our way," he announced to his fellow activists. "This isn't activism, it's abuse." Quaid Benson, one of the conference's security consultants, admired how Statham had defused the situation without a single aggressive move. It was a masterclass in presence over force. Remy Doyle, another protester who had been uncomfortable with the personal attacks, finally found his voice. "I came here to protest environmental policies, not to attack a kid. We need to do better." Sterling West, a conflict resolution specialist who happened to be at the conference, recognized the skillful way Statham was giving the protesters a face-saving way to back down. He wasn't shaming them, he was reminding them of their better nature. Tobias York, watching from the conference center steps, saw how Statham's words were having a greater impact than any physical intervention could have achieved. The actor was fighting bullying with wisdom rather than force. Uriel Clayton, another security team member, maintained his position but relaxed his stance as he saw how Statham's approach was working. The situation was defusing itself through dialogue rather than confrontation. NexLevel, still standing his ground despite the harassment, showed remarkable composure. His quiet dignity in the face of bullying seemed to support Statham's point better than any words could. "You want to fight for the environment?" Statham continued, his voice carrying authority without aggression. "Then focus on the issues, not personal attacks. This young man just gave a presentation on sustainable energy innovation. Did any of you actually listen to it?" The question hung in the air as Beckett's remaining supporters looked at each other uncertainly. Their prepared chants and insults seemed suddenly childish in the face of Statham's measured reason. Donald Trump's continued absence from the situation, despite being in the building, spoke volumes. The contrast between his silence and Statham's active intervention would later become a major point of discussion in media coverage. Several protesters began to put down their signs, including those with personal attacks on NexLevel. The mood in the plaza had shifted from confrontation to reflection, as Statham's words forced them to examine their methods. "Real change," Statham continued, "comes from addressing real issues, not attacking individuals. Especially not kids who are actually working on solutions." The impact of his words was visible in the faces of the protesters. What had seemed like righteous activism moments ago now looked like simple bullying in the light of his reasoning. NexLevel had maintained his composure throughout, demonstrating a maturity that contrasted sharply with his attacker's behavior. His dignity in the face of harassment only strengthened Statham's message. The plaza fell silent as Statham's words sank in. Even Beckett, who had been so eager to attack moments ago, seemed to be reconsidering his approach. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the scene as the situation continued to transform. What had started as a confrontation was becoming a moment of collective reflection. Have you ever witnessed someone defuse a tense situation with wisdom rather than force? Share your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the strongest response to bullying isn't a show of force, but a demonstration of true character. In the days following Jason Statham's intervention at the tech conference, the impact of that afternoon continued to ripple through various communities. Aaron Whitaker, a social media analyst, tracked how the incident had sparked a national conversation about the line between activism and bullying. The protest group had undergone a profound transformation. Calvin Rhodes, one of the original organizers, initiated a complete overhaul of their tactics and messaging. "We lost sight of our mission," he admitted in a viral post. Environmental activism needs to focus on issues, not individuals. Dalton Avery, the conference's media coordinator, had been inundated with interview requests from major networks. Everyone wanted to know more about how an action star had transformed a potentially violent confrontation into a lesson about dignity and respect. The footage captured by various attendees painted a comprehensive picture. Elias Mercer, a video analyst specializing in viral content, noted how Statham's intervention would likely become a case study in effective conflict resolution. The tech community's response was particularly interesting. Camden Hollis, a prominent tech journalist, wrote a thoughtful piece about how the incident highlighted the need to separate legitimate criticism of tech industry practices from personal attacks on individuals, especially minors. Dean Whitmore, who had organized the youth section of the conference, reported an unexpected outcome. Applications for next year's Youth Innovation Program had tripled. Young people saw how NexLevel handled himself under pressure, he explained. It inspired them. The environmental movement experienced its own reckoning. Emmett Vaughn, a veteran environmental activist, published an open letter about the need to maintain moral authority through ethical protest methods. "We can't claim the high ground while engaging in personal attacks," he wrote. Felix Monroe, who ran a youth mentoring program, incorporated the incident into his anti-bullying curriculum. "It's a perfect example of how to stand up to bullies without becoming one," he explained to his students. The impact on the protesters themselves was profound. What had begun as an attempt to raise environmental awareness had become a masterclass in the power of measured response. Their subsequent public apology to NexLevel went viral, earning praise for its sincerity. Victor Sloan, a conflict resolution expert, developed a training program based on Statham's approach. "Notice how he never escalated," Victor would point out to his students. "He de-escalated while maintaining absolute control of the situation." The presidential silence became its own story. Brody Stanton, a political analyst, noted how Trump's absence from the situation spoke volumes about leadership in modern America. While one man stepped up, another stayed silent, he observed. The tech conference itself underwent changes. Jack Penrose, the head coordinator, announced new guidelines for handling protests that emphasized maintaining dialogue while preventing harassment. "We can encourage debate without enabling bullying," he stated. The security industry took notice as well. Lachlan Drew, a security consultant, praised Statham's tactical approach. "He controlled the space without aggression," Lachlan noted in his analysis. "That's the height of professional security work." NexLevel's response in the following weeks earned widespread respect. At his next public appearance, he focused entirely on his environmental innovations, demonstrating a maturity that impressed even former critics. The media coverage continued to evolve. Isaiah Brooks, a culture writer for a major publication, explored how the incident reflected broader societal issues about protest, privilege, and the responsibilities of public figures. social media platforms saw the emergence of new trends. The hashtag protest with dignity gained traction, promoting methods of activism that maintained moral authority while addressing legitimate concerns. Jason Statham's reputation underwent its own transformation. While always respected as an action star, he was now being studied by conflict resolution experts. His approach demonstrated how presence and wisdom could be more powerful than physical force. The environmental movement's soul-searching led to positive changes. Wyatt Callahan, an environmental strategy consultant, helped organizations develop new guidelines for ethical protest that protected both the cause and its moral standing. Education professionals took note. The incident became a teaching tool in schools across the country, used to discuss everything from bullying to effective activism. The complexity of the situation provided rich material for classroom discussions. The tech industry's response was equally thoughtful. Articles and panel discussions explored how to balance legitimate criticism of tech companies with respect for individuals, especially young innovators working on environmental solutions. 1 month after the incident, a remarkable meeting took place. Beckett, the lead protester, sat down with NexLevel to discuss environmental innovation. Their conversation, moderated by Jason Statham, demonstrated how adversaries could become collaborators. The conference's youth program expanded its scope. Future events would include sessions on handling public criticism and maintaining composure under pressure, skills that NexLevel had demonstrated so effectively. The security industry developed new protocols based on Statham's approach. Control through presence rather than force became a guiding principle for handling similar situations. Donald Trump's silence during and after the incident continued to draw commentary. The contrast between his inaction and Statham's intervention became a metaphor for different approaches to leadership and responsibility. The lasting impact was perhaps best summarized by a viral video that emerged weeks later. It showed young protesters at various events maintaining dignity and focus while addressing issues rather than individuals. The Statham effect, as it became known, was changing how people approached confrontation. Environmental groups reported an unexpected benefit. Their messages were being taken more seriously now that they had publicly committed to ethical protest methods. Attacking ideas rather than individuals proved more effective at creating change. The tech conference circuit underwent its own evolution. Future events emphasized bridging divides between activists and innovators, creating dialogue instead of confrontation. The incident had shown how much common ground existed when personal attacks were removed from the equation. Jason Statham's subsequent interviews about the incident emphasized one key point: real strength isn't about dominating others, he explained. It's about maintaining dignity while standing up for what's right. NexLevel's environmental innovations received renewed attention, this time focused entirely on their merits rather than his family connections. The clarity of his ideas shone through once personal attacks were removed from the conversation. The incident's impact continued to grow as more people recognized its broader implications. It wasn't just about one confrontation, it was about how society could handle disagreements with dignity and respect. Have you ever seen a moment of conflict transform into an opportunity for positive change? Share your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful victories come not from defeating others, but from showing them a better way forward.